We're calling on for Rod now. Yes, please. And then closing song will be Sheer.
So where's Peter? Is Peter here still? No, he's gone. He told us all about this lovely grape juice. I found a bottle, but I'm a bit disappointed. It's clear. I was looking for the purple stuff, but that didn't happen. Yeah, that's about how divine I am. Benji asked me to share a few words about the establishment of Shalem, and I shared this morning about our motivation and where that motivation came from. I remember reading a quote that Sister White wrote saying there needs to be a health retreat outside of every city. And she named Adelaide and she named Melbourne. She didn't name Perth, but Perth's a city, isn't it? And so that was really the deep conviction that was put on my heart, that there was no Adventist health retreat in Western Australia. And so to me, our duty was plain. No one else was doing it. You know how sometimes you wonder what God wants you to do with your life? Well, there was counsel. We need a health retreat in Western Australia. And so, first of all, I thought, well, who am I to do it? And then, God sorts that out pretty quick. Whose duty is it? Well, it's those that recognise the responsibility. And so I made a deal with God that, I'd had experience developing properties, and Desley and I and my parents were down at Walpole on Dingo Flat Road near the Valley of the Giants, halfway through developing 150 acres of beautiful carry country. And we'd built 2 houses and the orchards in the garden, the whole thing. We'd retired. I'd retired. I was 30-something and I was out of here. But, God turned my heart. And so I made a deal with God that I would use my expertise if he used his. So my expertise was finding a suitable property, developing the water systems, building the infrastructure, planting the orchard and the garden and all the rest of it. And then it was his job to send someone along to do the health side of things. Well, he didn't keep his bargain, but that's another story. Might tell you about another time. But Benji had some photos of Shalem and in the early days, and that'd be great. But would you rather me tell you about, this is Brendan planting corn and this is Warren doing this? Or would you rather me tell you about a couple of miracles that God did about the establishment? You want some miracles? Yeah, okay, all right. So here we are down at Walpole, living the dream. I'd chosen the tree that I was going to be buried under. I'd set my plan for life. We're going to raise our kids down there in the bush, and I'd go surfing twice a week, and we'd grow our own food, and yeah, we were out of here. God put us on this on our heart, but anyway, so cut a long story short, we read, we studied, we planned, we talked to friends, close friends that we worshipped with. And then I organised, some of you know Donnelly Village, the other side of Manjimup. So we booked some accommodation there for the weekend, and everyone I could think of, we invited, we want to share this, cast this vision and see what you think. And so I can't remember how many people were there, 40, 30, 50, I can't remember. And we talked about it long and hard, and the conclusion was, yes, Rod, you're right. We need to do this, and you're the person to do it. And that wasn't what I wanted to hear, but, God had put it on my heart, and I recognised I was just trying to deflect that responsibility. So anyway, we started. So we started looking for property, and that was interesting. We looked at many properties, some absolutely fantastic. Anyone, I don't know whether it's still there, Donnelly River Wines on the Nannup Road? No? I'm sure it's still there. We desperately wanted to buy that place so that we could make organic grape juice. But anyway, we looked for property. At the same time, we realised to finance it, we were going to need to sell our property at Walpole. And there was another family, Greg and Glennis Frankie, that lived out at the Purett, and they were to sell their property, and we were going to come in, establish a non-profit association, Western Natural Health Centre, that Shalem is still owned by, invest our money in, and buy a property and develop it for God's glory. But our property was worth a lot more than the Frankie, so it was vital for us to buy a place. By the way, we didn't do it at Walpole, one, because it's so far away from Perth, and secondly, because the council wanted $150,000 for us to upgrade the gravel road to bitumen to our gate before they'd let us do anything except build a house. So it's like, okay, we're out of here. So we decided to put our property on the market, and everyone involved, Greg and Glennis Frankie, Warren and Hazel, my parents, Desley and I, and also Rob and Josie Carson that used to live in Manjimup, they were all in on this gig. We met down at Walpole and we talked about it over Sabbath, making plans, and then we decided we need to sell this property, so let's see what God would have us do about selling this property. So we never, in our discussions that Sabbath night, we never mentioned a figure, talked around the issue, and then we decided we'd all get a piece of paper each and write what we thought we should list the property for and put it in a hat and see what happened. And we did that, and everyone, all 8 of us, wrote $350,000. We'd never mentioned a figure. Okay, so we're like, right, okay, Lord, we're going to list it for that and we're not going to accept a cent less. So we put it on the market ourselves, private sale, because it's God's money. We didn't want to pay an agent. And I can't remember how many months it was on. I'm thinking 8, 10. I can't remember the story. If the others were here, Desley, are you here? No? Okay. If the others were here, they could correct my memory. But it was months and months and months. And during that time, we had one person come and look at the property. He was ADF serviceman. He'd had an accident, had a big knock on the head. He'd spent nearly 2 years in rehab. He just got his licence back, etc., etc. And he was looking for a country property to escape to live, his life. And he came and, I love it. I want to buy it, but I have to wait for the insurance payout. And he came twice during those 8 or 10 months. And after this time, we're continuing looking for property, and then we decided, okay, let's get an agent involved. And so an ex-hippie down the road that knew when dinner time was and always turned up at our house because he knew he'd get a feed. He was a single guy. We listed it with Bob, and $350, mate. We won't accept a cent less. So he went off and he started marketing it, and nothing happened. And then we found this property here. Okay, we'd looked at some glorious properties, right? The views, the buildings, etc., etc. And then God directed us to this place that was far less glorious than we'd hoped for. And maybe this is a lesson for you guys that are searching for property. Maybe you haven't found just what you look for or are quite looking for because you're looking for the wrong thing. And that was our experience. So you've seen this property. The bush isn't towering carries. That's what we were aiming for. The creek's a bit brackish. The water can get a bit brackish at times. We wanted perfectly clear water. I mean, where can you get that in the southwest? Perfectly clear water. It's all got, etc., etc. So we finally found this place, and distrustful of ourselves, we decided to put out a fleece. Now, I'm no expert at putting out out fleeces, but we just wanted to plead for God's leading, his wisdom. And so we decided to put an offer on this place subject to the sale of our property in Walpole. And remember, it had been on the market for months, and we'd had one person come and look at it. And I can't remember the period we put the offer on for this property, the Archer property as it was called. Anyway, trying to collect my memories. I'm going to say it was 3 months, all right? And 2 weeks before that 3 months was up, we'd still only had that one man come to look at the property. And people were telling us, well, you've obviously put too high a price on it, right? You're not playing the market. You've done the wrong thing. But we didn't believe, we believed that God had led us to write $350,000 on each of those 8 pieces of paper. And so 2 weeks out, and so we're praying. You understand, we're praying for God's will to be done. We weren't desperate. There are other properties. We just wanted to know if this was the one God wanted us to have. In those 2 weeks, we had either 8 or 9 groups of people come and look at that property. Every one of them, every couple, and one group were 2 couples. There were 2 houses on the property that we'd built, Mum and Dad's and Desley and ours. Everyone said, we're going to get finance. This is the place for us. One of the guys I remember worked on the rigs up north, money to burn, and his father was the state lending, the honcho in the, what's it called, Bank West Bank. It's like, well, he's going to get a loan approval. His dad's the boss of lending money from Bank West, and he's got this income. Cut a long story short, by the last day of that offer on this property, subject to the sale of our place, we still hadn't received an offer. And the day before that 3 months was up, another agent called. Ginger, his name was. He lived over the valley. And he says, I hear you're selling your property. And I said, yeah, it's listed with Bob, exclusive agency. So if you think you've got I've got a client. Yeah, I've got a client. And I said, well, just talk to Bob. And he says, oh, can I come and have a look? And I said, well, I think you're wasting your time because I think it's going to be sold by tomorrow afternoon at 5 o'clock. That was the cut-off. And he says, what makes you think that? And I said, I'm a believer. And I just believe it's going to be sold by tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Yeah, whatever. Can I come around tomorrow? I want to look at it because if it doesn't sell, I've got a client. And I said, yeah, okay. So he came over at about 3:30 and we drove around in his 4-wheel drive, and at about, we spent time talking and looking at this and all the rest of it. And about 20 to 5, he dropped me off at one end of the property. It was quite long. And he wanted to drive me home, and I said, no, mate, I'll just walk. I'll just walk up the long driveway. So I'm just wandering along, and I'm having a conversation with God and just saying, that's fine, Lord. It's great. We're asking you for an answer, okay, and you're giving us the answer. And I think this property would be really good, but you know better. That's fine. And so I'd resigned myself to the fact that it wasn't going to be sold that day, and this one purchased. So I wander up the track. I can distinctly remember it. We had my red Kelpie with me, and Zwingli, his name was. And I wandered down to the house, because we'd built this mud brick house in the Tingle Forest, and I wandered past the shed and down to the house, and I noticed Bob's ute was there, the agent. And it was just there, and I thought, yeah, of course, it's dinner time, Bob knows in half an hour time dinner's on the table and he'll get a feed. That's why he's here. And so I just walked into the house. G'day, Bob. He was in there talking to Desley and little Katie. Katie was, 2 or something. And I said, g'day, Bob. And I went over to the kitchen and got a drink out of the sink, get a drink. And he's, yeah, g'day, Rod. Yeah, good. Are you here for dinner, mate? Yeah, Desley's invited me for dinner. Yeah, good on you, mate. And I'm standing there drinking my drink, And he says, he was just really casual, right? And he said, there's something on the fridge for you. We had a old Kero fridge. Anyone old enough to remember the old Kero fridges? Yeah, good on you guys and ladies. And so I just wandered over, glass of water in my hand, just went over and picked up this piece of paper. It was a full price cash offer for $350,000. And I looked at my watch and it was 5 to 5. And I got on the phone and I ring up, I still remember his name, David Reese was his name, the agent in Manjimup that was selling this place. And I got on the phone just like that and I said, Dave, it's Rod here. Yeah, I know, he said. I know. Yeah, it's a pity. I was hoping you'd buy it, but that's okay. And I said, Dave, I've got a full price cash offer in my hand. And he just went silent. And he knew exactly what we were up to. He was a Catholic guy, non-practicing Catholic, but I'd explained to him about the fleece and, you know, our prayers to God, wanting God to make decisions for us and stuff like that. You know, take it out of our feeble wisdom. And I'm not advocating fleeces, you know. I'm not saying everyone needs to do fleeces to make decisions. It's the decision we made at the time and God honoured it. And he just went quiet, just dead quiet. And I'm like, Dave, are you there? And he goes, yeah. And then he just said, that's faith. And he said that 3 times. He said, that's faith. And then he paused and he said, that's faith. It was like, yeah, powerful. So that's why we bought this property. God did a miracle. Yeah. Some years later, we're here. We'd started the health retreat and we realised that, well, it was only, 18 months, 2 years later. No, maybe 3 years later, I can't remember. And we realised that the restrictions, the plan, and this is the second miracle. Have I got another 5 minutes? Yeah? The planning restrictions put on by council, etc. here, were gonna stop us from doing things we wanted, like a training school. You know, it was zoned rural and we could have the house here and they had given us permission to run the health retreat, but we needed more houses as well for staff. And so we decided to go through the process of getting approval for more facilities. And so we engaged a planning consultant. I won't say much about them except that they were a total waste of time and money. In the end, I ended up writing I wrote the whole planning application and they just massaged it into the format with the right size headings and the right size text. It was just rubbish. One thing they did do is find someone to do the maps that were necessary. Yeah. Anyway, and so we sent it off to the State Planning Commission, West Australian Planning Commission it was called. And that was fine. They contacted us back through the consultants and they said, okay, we'd like you to make this change to your proposal. So we made that change, cost us about $1,500. We sent it back. The Planning Commission sent it back and saying, oh, we need to make this change. So we did that, cost us another $2,000. Sent it back. Oh, you need to do this change. We complied again. You know, it was within the bounds of what we were hoping to achieve, so that's fine. We sent it back. We heard nothing for months and months. The only thing we heard from was from the planning consulting company that sent us, you can see how cranky I was about this. They send us a letter every month that cost us $150 that said, no, there's been no activity on the progress of your application. So I quit them and I said, I don't want any more letters. You are no longer our consultant. And so it just sat in the Planning Commission. I can't remember how many months and months, maybe 6, 8, I can't remember exactly. And we had a program happening here and we had 2 or 3 ladies and a couple of guys and one day I was in the office and I got a phone call and the person didn't identify themselves. They just said, hello, is this Rod? And I said, yeah, is this Shalem Health Retreat? Yes. I'd like to speak to Rod. Yeah, speaking. And this person said, I'm just calling to let you know that your rezoning application has been refused. And I said, oh, really? And the lady, actually I can't remember if it was a lady or a man, said, yeah, I just felt I needed to call you and to let you know. And I said, who is this, sorry? Click. The phone went dead. What was I thinking? Can you imagine what I'm thinking? Like, I'm disappointed because that means no training school, no extra staff houses, etc., like this. I'm disappointed. I'm praying, Lord, what's this? What's with this? You've led us in the past. You purchased this. You did that miracle, and so I'm really perplexed. And I think it was time for me to give a lecture because, by the way, I said God didn't keep his bargain, that I made with him originally, because he decided I needed to not only do the buildings and the orchards in the garden, but also to be the health director. Yeah, anyway, he makes us who we are, doesn't he? So anyway, I go into the lounge room and I guess on my face, this lady can see my perturbation. And one of the ladies that was there, and she said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm all right. I just had this really strange phone call." And she said, "Do you want to share it?" And I was just impressed to share it with her and the other guests because how the Shalem crew, how some people just really enter into what you're doing and it's like they become your best advocates and they're thinking about how they can help and, all this sort of stuff. Yeah. Well, this group was like this, so I thought, okay, I'll share it with them. And so I shared about this strange phone call and I shared the whole history, of the rezoning application and stuff like that. And this lady, she said, I said, yeah, let's just get on with what we're going to talk about. And she said, "Can I speak to you afterwards?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And after the lecture, she came and she said, I actually work for a planning consultancy in Perth. And what just happened to you is very, very strange. And I've been thinking about it all during this lecture. And the only thing I can think of is I'm going to call you after I go home and I'm going to give you a name and a number and I want you to call this person. Don't tell them who gave you this name and number. Call this person and ask and tell them briefly what has happened and say, "Can I have a meeting with you, please?" Intrigued, right? It's like, wow, it's cloak and dagger stuff. And so when she went home, she she called me and gave me this man's name and number, and I called it. And he said, "Who's this?" And I explained, and he says, "What's this about?" And I explained, and he goes, "Who gave you my number?" And I said, "I'm sorry, the person asked me not to divulge that." And he's like, "Right." And he thought for a bit, and he said, "When are you going to be in Perth next?" And I said, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And he said, "Okay, I'll meet you at," I think it was 9:30. And he told me where to meet him. And I'll see you then, just like that. And so I'm like, right, I don't know who this guy is, but I need to be prepared. And so I stayed up most of the night. I think I got 2 hours sleep. Stayed up most of the night preparing this book that I bound, with all the documentation, all the correspondence, how we had complied with the Planning Commission's request and the changes and the whole thing, told the whole story in documents. And I bound it, and at 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever, I headed off to Perth to meet this guy, 5 o'clock, whatever. And I get there, and it's Minister for Planning's office, and this guy is a bureaucrat in the planning department. I wish I could remember his name. And the secretary said something funny. She said, who are you? And I explained, and she said, "How did you get this appointment?" he doesn't meet with people that are going through this process. And I said, I remember saying, "I think it's a God thing." And she's like, "What?" Anyway, I'm waiting for him. He comes out and he meets me, takes me into one of these little conference rooms sort of thing. And he sits down, we sit down, and he says, so tell me the story. And so I said, oh, it's all here. So I passed across the document. He opened it, flicked through a couple of pages, closed it, pushed it back to me, and he said, no, tell me the story. Tell me what you're trying to do down there. And so I told him the Shalem story. I told him our motivation, what we're doing, why, the whole thing. I just spoke to him like he was a brother that didn't understand. You know what I mean? Just the whole thing. And I neglected to say that he said, you've got either 10 or 15 minutes. I can't remember what, you know. It was either 10 or 15 minutes. And I'm like, right, I'm going to make the most of this. And I decided I'm going to go right up to the second, okay? I'm not going to stop. I'm going to go right up to the second and tell what God has done here. I told him the story about purchasing the place, you know, the whole thing. 40 minutes later, after asking some clarifying questions, he said, okay, Rod, thanks for your time. I need to go to another appointment. Please leave it with me. I can't guarantee anything, but please leave it with me. I'll look into it. Praise God, eh? Did we have a result? No, we did not. We did not. Months passed. Months. I can't remember how many. 5 months. 4 months. I can't remember. 6. Can't remember. Nothing. Heard nothing. Then one day we got an A4 envelope in the mail, in that white mailbox box up on Muir Highway where we used to get our mail up there opposite the Von Hoff's house. I can't remember who picked it up, but boy, what a day. Because when I opened that envelope, inside was a copy of the Government Gazette, okay? In the West Australian Government Gazette is where legislation is published, okay? And it's sent out to all the government offices to see when the law is changed, right? Yeah? And there's a copy of the Government Gazette in there. I'm thinking, who sent me this? The office of the Minister for Planning, it said on the back. And I'm like, what's this? And I'm looking through legislation about something and something else and something else. Rezoning application for Shalem Health Retreat. And it had been published in the Government Gazette. It's part of law. It's part of planning law in Australia, in Western Australia, that we can do at Shalem everything that we felt we needed to do. Miracles, eh? Miracles. So Shalem's, over the years when Desley and I felt called to go and be involved in establishing Eastwood Missionary College, and we left Shalem, we believed we had a team in place that would continue the ministry. That didn't happen. A couple of key people left, and within a short period of time, Shalem ceased to offer health programs, and some of you might remember those years. And Shalem was in a bit of a doldrum, and Kelvin and Nicole will remember it more than anyone else, and Andy and Julia as well. They were here holding the fort. You'll remember, Emily, those times when it was pretty lonely out here, wasn't it? For years, you know. And then one of Eastwood graduates, Tina Krause, came over and got things going again, and things trickled along a bit, and some wonderful work was done during those times. And see it now. See it now. And during those times, we kind of doubted. At one stage, we even wondered whether we should sell the place and put the money into some other ministry, some other work, because we just like we couldn't get it started again. And then I remember the fateful day when Kelvin and Nicole started talking about these people that they've met over at Busselton maybe, or in Perth, I can't remember. Benji and Madonna. And then we get this story about Noel and Jin, and look at Shalem now. But it's those miracles that God does in our lives and in ministries like these two that I've shared with you that give us confidence. What are we told? We have nothing to fear for the future except we forget how God has led us in the past.
And He's teaching in our past history.
There you go. Thank you for the rest of that, Brendan. Yeah. So all praise, honour and glory goes to God.